Good evening, everyone. In the last session, we studied about the determination of income and employment theory, the introductory part, including ADAS, their schedule, diagram, and also the important features which are being displayed on your screen. Other than that, we also studied one of the very major topics, which is propensity to consume. Under this, we studied about the different tools, which is APC, MPC, saving function. Under this, we studied about APS, that is average propensity to save, and also MPS, which is marginal propensity to save. These are all the questions comprising of subjective as well as one markers. There were so many one markers which we discussed in the last class. Now, I would like to proceed with the next topic in this chapter, which is determination of equilibrium. I repeat, which is determination of equilibrium with the help of aggregate demand and aggregate supply concept, or with the help of saving and investment concept. So here comes the determination of national income and employment using aggregate demand and aggregate supply concept. Just children, just give me a minute. With poor bandwidth, I would like to continue for 2 more minutes with switched off video. Then I'll just switch my video on. I hope I am audible. Okay. So the first approach, which is AD and AS approach, this was given by Professor Kins. Whenever you are starting with answer, whenever you are writing this answer, this is generally a 4 or 6 mark question only, never a shorter answer. So you will write to, you need to write the opening statement, which is according to Keynesian theory of equilibrium in income and employment, we believe that equilibrium can only be set up when AD is equal to AS. I repeat, AD is equal to AS. How do we prove this? We can prove this with the help of this schedule. See, whenever you are going to prove this AD and AS equilibrium, after opening statement right away, you need to make the schedule. I don't bind you to write the same numbers written on the screen. You can take your own number, but you need to write all these heads in the table, which is first of all income, then consumption, saving and investment. We know this very well, that consumption and investment together become AD, and consumption and saving together become AS. And then the last most column, which is very, very important, we need to take care of this, that we are drawing the different phases indicating whether the equilibrium is being drawn or not. For example, in the previous sets of the combination you see, you will watch that AD is greater than AS. You see, 30 is greater than 20, 25 is greater than 10, 35 is greater than 30. So all these are the phases when AD is greater than AS. This condition is known as the situation of excess planned demand. And when you see this phase, 40 is equal to 40, it means AD is equal to AS. So the value which you are writing in your table, they must satisfy the three phases, which is AD is greater than AS. The second phase, which is very, very important, that is AD is equal to AS. And the third phase, which is 45 is less than 50, 50 is less than 60. That means this time AD is less than AS. So in your schedule, you need to write about all the three different phases. I repeat that you can take up any number of your choice, but just remember that the heads cannot be changed and the pattern of writing the phases cannot be changed. Always opt for AD. That means you cannot write like AD is greater than AS, AD is equal to AS, and AS is less than, yeah, AS is greater than AD. No, can't write like that. You just have to opt for AD first. Then look at the diagram. After the schedule, you need to make the diagram. Here in the diagram, there are two compulsory things which you need to draw. It is not mandatory to draw this C curve or consumption curve, but it is mandatory to draw this AD curve. I repeat, it is mandatory to draw the AD curve. Now, what there in this AD curve? We can see that in this AD curve, C plus I is being represented, whereas AS is the curve which is equal to Y or income curve. Any doubt in this? You can just mention here in the doubt solving section. Now comes is the equilibrium point. Before we understand the equilibrium point, I would like to tell you the details about the Y and X axis. Here is the Y axis, which is representative of AD and AS. That means they are represented on Y axis. And here is the X axis where we represent income. Here you can see it is written income. So on x-axis, we determine the income. Now, question is where is ADS determined and where is the M or income determined? That is determined at the point of equilibrium. And you have studied economics so far that you know very well that equilibrium point is always denoted by point E. So this is point E, where you can see that this upward sloping AS curve is intersecting this curve, which is AD curve, at point E. So this point E is the equilibrium point. At this equilibrium point, the income of the economy has been determined point O to M. Whereas this condition is a full employment condition. That means we assume that the economy is in full employment at the point of equilibrium. It means each and every resource in the economy has been employed. Now, if you're talking about the y-axis, there you can see that it is determining AD and S. So this is the point at which the economy will decide to produce and to supply, as well as the consumers will be able to demand or consume. Then the third thing comes, which is after this diagram, the explanation of this equilibrium. As I just told you that at point E, aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, and OM point is the equilibrium of income. Why can't we fix an equilibrium when AD is greater than AS? While we know that in modern economics, aggregate demand greater is always appreciated, then why can't we fix an equilibrium when AD is greater than AS? See, there is a logic behind. That logic is when aggregate demand is greater, believe me that whatever we are talking here about is all about the theory. So everything is planned. That means everything is X and concept. I repeat, everything is X and concept. And everything is in short run. So you cannot make immediate changes into the productivity or the planning. So when everything is in short run and everything is planned, then the planned inventory, which was supposed to be some certain numbers, will fall below the desired level or fall below the planned level. That means when AD starts rising and supplier needs to satisfy the AD, what will he do? He will definitely take the supplies out of the existing inventory. If you're a commerce child, you must be knowing that inventories means the stock which is compulsorily maintained by the producer for meeting out any urgent needs. If not, if you're a humanity or science student, listen to me very carefully. Inventory means the stock. Basically, stock is known as inventory, which is maintained by any producer till a certain level which is already planned to meet the urgent needs of the demand and supply. So when inventories start falling below the desired level, the producer is further encouraged to produce more. When he increases the production, then definitely aggregate supply will rise. And aggregate supply rises till the point it becomes equal to aggregate demand. Obviously, I just give you one example here, the numerical example here. Suppose the inventory was 500 And earlier, the aggregate demand was for 200 units. Now, suddenly, the aggregate demand from 200 rises to 300. That additional demand, which is going to be asked from the market, cannot be fulfilled immediately with excess production, as it is a short-term period. So that 100 additional demand will be supplied from the inventory. So the inventory which was planned to be 500 will now become 400. Now the producer will next day plan to produce more 100 units. That means the aggregate supply will rise. This rise of 100 more units will next day put the AD equal to AS. So we cannot fix the equilibrium when AD is greater than AS. Now comes is the situation when AD is less than AS. See, when AD is less than AS, that situation also works. Sometimes when AS is greater in economy, it is appreciated because productivity is high, GDP is high, employment is high. But even then, we do not appreciate the equilibrium at this point. Why? When AD is less and AS is higher, it means the supplier is producing more than what the consumer is demanding or is planning to buy. So the stock or the inventory will tend to rise. Definitely, when you are producing something and you're not able to sell it out, you will have to stock it in the stores. So you will start increasing the inventories. This is again not a healthy situation. The unsold stock which is put in inventories actually discourage the producers and they further reduce the production. When they reduce the production, the aggregate supply will definitely fall and it falls till the point it becomes equal to aggregate demand. Children, remember these 2 points, this slide I just discussed, that is point 1 and point 2 I just told you, are actually a separate question also. They can be asked, what if aggregate demand is more than AS and what if aggregate demand is less than AS? This can also be a one marker. The one marker language is somewhat like this, that when inventories increase, it is something like when AD is less than AS, what will be its impact on the inventory? In the same way, when AD is greater than AS, what will be the impact on the inventories? So such kind of questions are asked from this part. Although this is a part of equilibrium question, but they can be independent question also. So I hope this concept is clear. This is a 6 marker. Please lock it that you need to prepare the equilibrium questions with both the approaches. One of the approach will definitely be there. If not, then the other different approaches in 6 marker from the same chapter. I'll tell that to you as well. Now coming to the other determination of national income with the help of saving and investment approach. I repeat, saving and investment approach. The saving and investment approach is nothing very new. It is also derived from aggregate demand and aggregate supply approach only. Where does it come from? This aggregate demand and aggregate supply approach actually comes from the theory of Professor Keynes. And Professor Keynes at the same time said that AD, which is equal to C plus I, and AS, which is equal to C plus S, if you cancel C, which is common here, what you find is I and S. That means the equilibrium can also be fixed when S or saving is equal to investment. Now, coming to the next part of this particular question, that is schedule. The schedule says that we have some headers like income, consumption, saving, investment, AD, AS, and conclusion. Previously, we gave importance to AD and AS, but in this answer, we'll give importance to saving and investment. You see, that is why they have all been written in bold letters. So what you find over here, in the last in conclusion, you can write S is equal to I also, and you can write AD is equal to AS also. Better you write S is equal to I in the last phase or conclusion phase, because this time you're proving the equilibrium with the help of SNI approach. So what you initially find, here you see that savings are less than investment. Savings are less than investment. Again, till this point, we find that saving is less than investment. What does it mean? If saving is less than investment, that means the consumers are spending more than what they are saving. And when consumers are spending more than what they are saving, obviously AD is greater than AS. So they both are the similar situations, nothing very new. Then you see at this phase, 10 is equal to 10. That means saving is equal to I or investment. Then you see in this phase, you will see that 15 is greater than 10, 20 is greater than 10. This time, S is greater than I. I repeat, S is greater than I. That means saving is greater than I, investment. If saving is greater, it means people are planning to save more and spend less. So when expenditures are less, that means AD will become less. So here you can relate ADAS with the help of SNI. They are the same things. They are nothing new, only it's all about the importance. This time we are giving emphasis over SNI. Now coming to schedule. Schedule is very important to be remembered, children. Children generally commit a mistake. They only make this particular diagram, which is wrong. It is halfway done. You need to make both the diagrams and parallelly. If you want, if you can use single quadrant for representing both the diagrams, that's not at all a problem. You can continue with the single quadrant for representing ADAS, SNI, all the things. But that looks very filthy. That looks not clear to the examiner. So you better make parallel quadrants for representing ADAS and SNI. I had already explained ADAS equilibrium at point E here. And I had also explained that this is the phase where AD is greater than AS. And this is the phase where AD is less than AS. Now coming to SNI approach. You can see that this is S line or S curve, which is moving upward because we know that as income rises, saving also rises. And you can look at this parallel line, horizontal line parallel to x-axis, which is investment curve. Now you see saving is initially starting from negative quadrant or the value is negative. This is what is known as the proportion of this saving. This situation is known as this saving. So initially you can see that saving is negative. Then you will see that saving starts rising. Earlier it becomes 0. Then it starts rising to positive. At a point, it intersects I. This is the point where it is intersecting I. The point where saving is intersecting I is the equilibrium point. Before this, we can see that saving is less than I. And here we can see that saving is greater than I. I hope it is clear to all of you. Now, the same kind of explanation which we saw in the last question, why there is no equilibrium when S is greater than I. When S is greater than I, it means there is higher saving and lower consumption. That means consumers are saving less and consuming more. It means the higher aggregate demand. And with higher aggregate demand, the inventories will start falling. I come back to the answer. It's written. This should be explained first. Initially, what we learned, that is S is less than I. When S is less than I, it means there is lower savings and higher consumption. When there are higher consumption, it means we are having a rise in the aggregate demand. With rise in the aggregate demand, the inventories will start falling or it will fall below the desired level. So the producer will invest and produce more. With more production, the producer will wait for a point till aggregate demand becomes equal to aggregate supply. Now, the next explanation. What happens if S is greater than I? That means saving is greater than investment. High saving means there is lower consumption, means the consumer is demanding less and saving more. If there is less demand, there will be fall in aggregate demand and the inventories will rise above the desired level. It will help the producer to reduce the production and they will reduce the production till the point aggregate demand becomes equal to aggregate supply. I hope it is clear to you all. Now comes a new concept. This is the concept again given by Professor J.M. Keynes under this theory only. This is the concept of multiplier. This time we'll not talk about money multiplier or income multiplier. We'll talk about investment multiplier. If you could relate this with the money multiplier concept, which you studied in money and banking chapter. This is very much similar to that, but it has more of numerical implication as per this chapter. So what he said about the multiplier, he said that investment multiplier is the rate of change in income due to change in investment. We know this very well, that investment, an initial investment of less amount or a very meager amount further results into high or hike in income. So that hike in income is because of the initial investments made. But to what extent has there been change in income? To measure that, we use a tool which is known as the multiplier. Now, these are the formulas. To calculate multiplier, first of all, multiplier is represented by K. To calculate multiplier, we use three formulas. We use the first formula where we talk about change in income upon change in investment. This ratio tells us about that how many times the income has been multiplied in the economy because of the investments made. The second is we can also find the change in the income with the help of consumption. Therefore, we use the formula 1 upon 1 minus MPC. We can also assume or find the value of income or changed income with the help of saving. So here we use 1 upon MPS. I hope it is clear to you. Now, what is this basic concept depending upon? Children, one more thing here before I start teaching this. This is a 6-mark question where you will be asked about how does multiplier work or how does income multiplier work. So when it is being asked, the first thing you will write in your answer is this meaning. You just need to write the opening statement. There you need to write the meaning. Second, you need to write the formula. All the three formulas must be written in your answer. And then we write the table. I would first explain you this table. See, we have two assumptions before we start this question's answer. The first assumption is that the change in investment is believed to be some amount. There it's been taken 100 and MPC as well. MPC can be taken any amount. Preferably, you should take 0.5 because calculation becomes easy. So after this, you need to make a table with 4 heads. That is change in investment, change in income, change in consumption, and change in saving. So change in investment here, as I have already told you that in assumption, it is 100. Now, if investment in economy is being done as 100, you see the change in income is also 100. Now, that entire rupees which is being invested by somebody else is earning as well. That earning is further divided into 2 parts because MPC is 0.5, matlab aadha, half. Half of the income is being consumed and half of the income is being saved. So you see 50 rupees is being consumed and 50 is being saved. Remember, a person's consumption is another person's income. That is true. When you go to shop to buy something, suppose you go to buy an ice cream for you, so the money which you spend on buying the ice cream, that is the income of that shopkeeper. Now, when that shopkeeper with this earned money goes to hospital and makes a payment for doctor's bill, so that is the income of doctor. Now, that doctor, when he goes to his child's school for making the payment of the fee of the child, that is the income of the school. So you can see that there is a cycle where one's consumption is another man's income. So here 50 rupees which is being consumed becomes income of another person. Now that person will further consume 25 rupees and will save 25 as MPC assumed is 0.5. So this 25 becomes income of another person. Now that another person will again save 12.5 and will consume 12.5. That 12.5 which is being consumed will become the income of another person. So this cycle goes on till here we get 0. But you don't need to calculate these many things in the exam. You have time constraint over there. So just write 4 or 5 cycles. That's it. Now you just finally add up the number. Here it is 200 is the change in income finally. With the initial investment of 100, the final income is 200. Out of this 200, 100 has been consumed and 100 has been saved. Now, where does this data come from? How do we know that 200 is the final income? We know this with the help of the formula, where 1K is equal to, we can calculate it with MPS, we can also calculate it with the help of MPC. So K is equal to 1 minus MPC. I just told you the formula, right? So there I told you when K is equal to 1 upon 1 minus MPC, that means 1 upon 0.5. And you are that good enough to understand that is equal to, the value here comes is 2. That means income will be multiplied to 2 times. And what is the 2 times of 100? That is 200. So here income is 200. The same can be done with MPC also, MPS also, and can be done with the help of delta Y upon delta I. So when you're writing the answer of this question, you need to remember the flow. Here you lose your marks. First of all, opening statement, then these formulas, then this table, and then the explanation of this table. What is the explanation? I just told you all these points from this PPT has already been discussed with you from me. Here is the numerical explanation as I just told you. I'm not emphasizing over these two PPTs because here the description depends on you own. Like whatever word and the process of writing you are comfortable with, you can explain it with the way. It's not at all mandatory. Only 3 things are mandatory, which is to write opening statement, table, and the formulas. And the last, you need to depict everything. You need to explain everything in your own words. Now, children, coming to the next topic, which is again a 6 mark or 4 mark question, that is inflationary and deflationary gap. I repeat, inflationary and deflationary gap. See, inflationary gap or excess demand. See, there are two situations. The first situation is excess demand. When AD is greater than AS, that is known as excess demand situation. So when you are asked excess demand situation, you need to explain excess demand, that is AD is greater than AS situation, and you need to draw this diagram, this particular diagram, where you need to show that it is AS, this is AD. Fine. And this here, where AD is greater than AS, is the excess demand situation. Fine. So you just need to draw this particular diagram for excess demand. But when it is inflationary gap is something different. What is that situation now? Listen to me very carefully. See, I told you initially that Professor Kins had talked about the situations of ex ante and ex post. Ex ante is something where everything is planned, and ex post is something where everything is proposed or is planned for the future. So when everything is planned, there we believe that this is the situation. You see, this is the situation where there is an equilibrium with AD, and this is AD is greater than AS. I repeat, AD is greater than AS. That is excess demand. But everything doesn't happen as per the planning. The actual world is different from what we have planned. So planning is something different and actual is something different. So what happens that sometimes we plan this AD and this AS and this equilibrium point. This is the original equilibrium point which we had planned. But when the things don't go as per our planning and AD is greater than planned demand. I repeat, AD is greater than planned demand. Means we had planned this AD and AD1. That means this is the higher AD which we had not planned, which is actual. That means in the economy, demand is greater than what we had planned. In that situation, the AS curve is being intersected at different point. This is the new equilibrium point E1. This time we have a new equilibrium point. And this gap here is the inflationary gap. Why is this inflationary gap? This is the inflationary gap because here was the old E, that is equilibrium point, but here is the new equilibrium point. So this gap is all about the inflation. I hope this is clear to you. Nobody should have any doubt about it. Now, One more thing in this situation is that this triangle which you can observe is made up of three things. First is, of course, excessive demand. The second is, of course, excessive income. You see, here M becomes M1. That means when the equilibrium is changing, the income point is also supposed to change. But in actual sense, it doesn't happen. That is not possible. That is not visible. Listen to me very carefully. This is very, very important point. I repeat, this is a very important point. Listen to me very carefully. In case when there is inflationary gap, what are the impacts on income, employment, and the productivity? So let me tell you, because here on OM point, the economy was already on full employment. So the employment cannot increase because the economy was already at full employment. Second, when employment cannot change, income can also not shift from M to M1. This is just an imaginary situation. Third thing, when income cannot change, employment cannot change, then definitely we'll see that productivity can also not change. Then what will change? That is, of course, price. Because when we have to adjust with the existing stock or inventory, that means there are more people to demand and less people to supply, or there is more quantity being demanded but less is being supplied. So you learned in class 11 that when there is excess demand over supply, it is an inflationary situation and prices tend to rise. So here the prices will rise, but income, employment, and the output will not rise. This is what is inflationary gap. Now coming to deflationary gap. Deflationary gap is just an opposite situation. Here I just told you, no? Let me revise once. The causes of inflationary gap, that there is increase in consumption expenditure by the household. There may be rise in the investment by the firms and they can be increased by the government expenditure, and also the decrease in taxes. Now see, all the other things are increasing by decrease in taxes. See, whenever the government is decreasing the taxes, the affordability of the people or the price of the people rises. So when the price of the people rises or affordability of the people rises, then definitely we'll see that there will be rise in the demand of the goods. So here you can understand the causes of inflationary gap. Effects, I just told you that output will not change. Why will output not change? Because economy is already at full employment level. Employment opportunity will also not be affected as the economy is already at full employment level. The only thing which will be affected is that is the prices, the general price level that will definitely rise. Why will it rise or why will it increase? There will be an increase in the prices as there is excess demand. And when there is excess demand, there is shortage of supply, there will be a situation of bargain. And the producer will bargain and will sell the things to those who are ready to pay higher. So there will be increase in the prices. Now comes this deflationary gap. Deflationary gap, I would like to explain to you with the help of the diagram again. This is the diagram for deflationary gap. Now here you should assume that this is AD and this is AD1. That means this is something which was already planned. As per the planning, this was supposed to be the equilibrium point E, and this was supposed to be the full employment level, that is OM, and this is the income level of the or equilibrium of the income in the economy. But as I said already that everything doesn't go as planned, it may be lesser or the planning may not match with the actual one. So if in actual, the AD is lesser this time. I repeat, when AD is lesser than what we had planned. So the AD curve moves downward and it becomes AD1. The actual one is higher and the planned one is higher. The actual one is at the screen being shown with the help of AD 1. Now, what you see over here, a new equilibrium point is being maintained. This new equilibrium point is E1 this time. And this is also intersecting AS, but this time it is lower than what we had previously. So this gap here, this is the gap. This gap particularly, or this gap particularly, is the deflationary gap. This gap, which is known as deflationary gap, or this gap, which is the deflationary gap, is being caused because of lesser demand than what we had planned. Because there is deflationary gap, there can be a situation of lesser income. That means M can be shifted to M1. You see, the economy will tend to have lower income because people are demanding less. Production will also be affected. Employment will also be affected. So M becomes M1. And as at this situation, it is known as under full employment situation. I repeat, this gap is known as under full employment situation, because when we believe that this is the full employment situation, then definitely this is under full employment situation with deflationary gap. Now, the causes of deflationary gap: when there is fall in the consumption expenditure, when there is fall in investment expenditure, when there is fall in government expenditure, and also increase in taxes. As when the taxes are increased, the people tend to buy less as their affordability and their purchasing power is negatively affected. Now the impact: there will be unsold stock due to low aggregate demand, so the firm will reduce the output. See, we cannot increase the output because that is unattainable point, but this is attainable point, so we can reduce the output. There will be effect on employment opportunity also. They will decrease or they will fall. And there will be effect on the price also, as the prices will lead to fall. Now, the last topic of this chapter, that is about the measures. What can be taken to control the inflationary and deflationary gap? So first I start with inflationary gap. Taking you back to the chapter Money and Banking. There you were told about the functions of RBI. There you were told about the quantitative measures and qualitative measures to control the money supply. Now see, inflation is all about excess demand. Excess demand means the people have more affordability or they have more purchasing power. So if you want to reduce the purchasing power of the people, you need to control the money supply. And for controlling the money supply, basically, there are two people to play the major role. That is the government of India or government of any country, and also the central bank. So the central bank has a tool which is known as quantitative measure or qualitative measure. First, I'll tell you the quantitative measure. The quantitative measures are bank rate, repo rate, reverse repo rate, open market operation, CRR or cash reserve ratio, and statutory liquidity ratio. Under this, first is the bank rate. Whenever there is inflationary situation, what we can do is, or what the RBI can do is, the RBI will increase the bank rate. Now, what is the bank rate? Bank rate is the rate at which commercial banks take loan from central bank to meet their long-term credit needs. I repeat, bank rate is the rate at which central bank borrows money from, commercial bank borrows money from central bank at the long-term or for the long-term credit needs. Whenever there's inflationary gap, the RBI increases the bank rate. Remember these two keywords: increases the bank rate and inflationary gap. You need to write this in your answer. This will discourage the commercial banks to take loans from the central bank. When they do not take loan from central bank, they have lesser money to advance as loan, or they have lesser money to give the loans to the people. So their lending power will be decreased. And when their lending power is decreased or lending power is lesser, then definitely they will only give the loans to those who are ready to pay the higher rate of interest. Therefore, there will be lesser consumers to borrow the money from the bank. And this is how the liquidity from the market will be absorbed. Then comes as repo rate. Repo rate is the rate at which the commercial banks may take the loans to meet their short-term needs. Earlier, I told you about the long-term needs. This is the short-term needs. So commercial banks take the loan or may take the loan from central banks to meet their short-term loan. Again, the same thing. The words are also the same. Only thing will change is bank rate becomes repo rate. So when there is increase in bank rate and repo rate, then definitely the lending capacity of the commercial bank will fall, and they will advance loans only with the high rate of interest. And this time people, those who are having the capacity to pay more interest can only give this. Therefore, the liquidity in the economy will be absorbed. Now, reverse repo rate. It is reverse of repo rate. That is why it is known as reverse repo rate. This is the thing, or this is the kind of measure in which the central bank may borrow the money from commercial bank for a short period of time. And what they do, the interest rate paid to the commercial bank, that is increased. So when the rate of interest is increased, the commercial banks are encouraged to pay more loans to the central bank. And when they pay more loans to the central bank, then definitely they have less money to lend it to the public. And this is how the money supply in the economy is controlled. Whatever you are learning, children, that's all going to run the same in deflationary gap. The only thing is some of the terms will change. So listen to it very carefully so that you can kill two birds with a stone. That means with learning this topic, you will learn both the ways. That is inflationary gap as well as deflationary gap. Now, open market operation or OMO. OMO is nothing but the central bank's measure in which when the banks are or commercial banks are lending the loans to the people or giving money to the people, they have a margin requirement against the collaterals or securities. So these margin requirements here, these margin requirements are all against the collateral or securities. So when these margin requirements are increased, then the banks have lesser capacity of giving money to the people. Now, how do I relate this to the previous point? This, you see, open market operation in which the people can now sell back their securities, bonds, or whatever forfeitures they have to the bank so that they can get better returns. As this time the government has declared that you have better opportunity of earning high with when you return the securities, bonds, or forfeitures to the bank themselves or at the given period of time. So money supply is decreased and the demand is reduced. And when demand is reduced, inflationary gap will also be reduced. Now, legal reserve ratio. The legal reserve ratio is of two types, that is CRR and SLR. Children, this can be the one marker. CRR and SLR difference is very much asked. You need to remember they are very much common. That is why generally students get confused. What is CRR? Is the by the commercial banks with the RBI in the form of cash, whereas statutory liquidity ratio is the ratio of deposits which is maintained by the banks themselves or with the banks themselves, not only in the form of cash, but also kinds, like they can be documents or assets or the property or asset papers. They can be gold, they can be silver, they can be many other precious metals. So all these things are also reserved in the form of SLR. Now, when CRR and SLR, or in short, LRR is increased, then definitely the capacity of commercial banks is reduced to lend the loan to the people, and therefore the people are not able to borrow more of the money and the liquidity is absorbed. Now comes this qualitative measures. Qualitative measures are actually not directly associated with money control. They are not related to figure or number. That is why they are qualitative. Margin requirements I have already told you. Now rationing of credit. That means this time the commercial banks are instructed to only provide the loans on certain things or certain quotas, especially the productive loans like educational loan or loan for a business or investment is allowed. Whereas the unproductive loan like personal loan, car loan, consumer loan, they are restricted so that the people do not have the money to buy or demand the goods and the inflation in the economy can be controlled. Now, warning or direct action, sometimes the RBI, as it has the power, can also give the warnings, can persuade them, can give the direct instructions to the banks that no, you cannot give more than the fixed amount as loan to your customers. It is just an action to stop the commercial banks from giving loans for more than a limit. Now comes his moral suasion. Moral suasion is something again about the persuasion, this time on the moral grounds with the help of the guidelines to the commercial bank. The RBI checks the banks to give the loans to their customers. Now comes his fiscal policy. Other than the whatever policies we just now studied are known as monetary policy. Monetary policy is completely controlled by the RBI. Remember, children, if you're asked only monetary policy, write only quantitative and qualitative measures. If you're asked also about the fiscal policy, then you will write these points. And if no specifications, then you need to write everything. So fiscal policy is everything associated with the government policy related to their expenditure and the taxes, which is associated with the government budget. So first thing is when there is excess demand. See, the government will never come and ask you that don't spend. The government has its own ways. And first of all, government stops itself. So the government starts decreasing the expenditure. Secondly, as I told you, that government will never come and ask you not to spend. So what the other tool has, the government will increase the taxes on the goods and will also increase the direct taxes like income tax and all, so that the people do not have sufficient money to spend and their purchasing capacity is reduced. And the government also increases the public borrowing. As I just told you, OMO, that means purchasing and selling of the securities, bonds, and all these government debentures so that the people get attracted and they buy all these things. Take an example. If you are planning a holiday and you are planning to spend 5 lakhs on it, but suddenly the government has announced a very lucrative offer for the public borrowing. And that means the government is selling some of its security or gold bond or any other thing, which is with a very good offer. You will definitely divert your fund of trip towards investment because you're getting very good offer and you will feel that when this 5 lakhs becomes 6 lakh, I'll go for a better trip. So this is how the government tries to increase the public borrowing and absorb the liquidity. Now, how to control deficient demand? The tools are all same. The only thing, as I just mentioned, that a few words will only change. That is in quantitative and qualitative measure, like that is monetary policy, quantitative and qualitative measure. There you just see that bank rate, earlier I told you will increase, this time I will say decrease. So every measure, the rates will decrease. Why? When the rates are decreased, central bank will uh, let the commercial bank have more capacity of funding and liquidity, and this liquidity will pass on in the market to the consumers, and later the people will be encouraged to demand more. And if there is more demand, then the problem of deficient demand will be solved. This is how it works. And here we have also studied about the monetary and fiscal policies of controlling inflationary and deflationary gaps in the economy. I have already mentioned, children. Once more, I would like to tell you that you need to remember about the specifications of the question. There are some 6 markers, which is very, very important. You need to remember them. First of all, the equilibrium of both Just avoid the screen, listen to me carefully. The equilibrium question for both AD and AS. Second, inflationary gap and deflationary gap question. Third, full employment, underemployment, and overemployment situation. These are the three sets of questions out of which I can guarantee that one of them will be there in the question paper. Next, the process of investment multiplier. That what I explained you with the schedule. This can again be a 6-mark and 4-mark question. Now coming to the numericals. From this chapter, there are 2 to 3 mark numericals as well. Numericals are all algebraic based on all those equations which I explained you in the last session, where I told you about certain equations like what is the value of C, what is the value of X. That means saving equation, consumption equation, also the value of MPC and MPS, proving that MPC plus MPS is equal to 1, APC plus APS is equal to 1, and also the proving of equilibrium with the help of numerical. That means you will be given some figures and numbers. With the help of those numbers, you need to find out whether the economy is in equilibrium or not. So practice all these numerical questions. Sometimes numericals are also there with theory option. If you are not comfortable with the algebraic expressions of these numericals, please go ahead with the theory part of this. That's it. Thank you so much. I hope the session was comfortable for you and useful for you. See you next for the next unit, that is money and banking.